Love by Anton Chekhov. 3 o'clock in the morning. The soft April light is looking in at my window and caressingly winking at me with its stars. I can't sleep. I am so happy. My whole being from head to heels is bursting with a strange, incomprehensible feeling. I can't analyze it just now. I haven't the time. I'm too lazy. And hang analysis. Why is a man likely to interpret his sensations when he is flying head foremost from a belfry, or has just learned that he has won 200,000? Is he in a state to do it? This was more or less how I began my love letter to Sasha, a girl of 19 with whom I had fallen in love. I began it 5 times, and as often tore up the sheets, scratched out whole pages, and copied it all over again. I spent as long over the letter as if it had been a novel I had to write to order, and it was not because I tried to make it longer, more elaborate, or more fervent, but because I wanted endlessly to prolong the process of this writing. When one sits in the stillness of one's study and communes with one's own daydreams, while the spring night looks in at one's window. Between the lines, I saw a beloved image, and it seemed to me that there were, sitting at the same table writing with me, spirits as naively happy, as foolish, and as blissfully smiling as I. I wrote continually, looking at my hand, which still ached deliciously where hers had lately pressed it. And if I turned my eyes away, I had a vision of the green trellis of the little gate. Through that trellis, Sasha gazed at me after I had said goodbye to her. When I was saying goodbye to Sasha, I was thinking of nothing and was simply admiring her figure as every decent man admires a pretty woman. When I saw through the trellis 2 big eyes, I suddenly, as though by inspiration, knew that I was in love, that it was all settled between us, and fully decided already that I had nothing left to do but to carry out certain formalities. It is a great delight also to seal up a love letter, and slowly putting on one's hat and coat, go softly out of the house and to carry the treasure to the post. There are no stars in the sky now. In their place, there is a long whitish streak to the east, broken here and there by clouds above the roofs of the dingy houses. From that streak, the whole sky is flooded with pale light. The town is asleep, but already the water carts have come out, and somewhere in a faraway factory a whistle sounds to wake up the workpeople. Besides the post-box, slightly moist with dew, you are sure to see the clumsy figure of a house porter, wearing a bell-shaped sheepskin and carrying a stick. He is in a condition akin to catalepsy. He is not asleep or awake, but something in between. If the boxes knew how often people resort to them for the decision of their fate, they would not have such a humble air. I, anyway, almost kissed my post box, and as I gazed at it, I reflected that the post is the greatest of blessings. I beg anyone who has ever been in love to remember how one usually hurries home after dropping the letter in the box, rapidly gets into bed, and pulls up the quilt in the full conviction that as soon as one wakes up in the morning, one will be overwhelmed with memories of the previous day, and look with rapture at the window, where the daylight will be eagerly making its way through the folds of the curtain. Well, to facts. Next morning, at midday, Sasha's maid brought me the following answer. I am delighted. Be sure to come to us today. Please, I shall expect you. Your S. Not a single comma. This lack of punctuation and the misspelling of the word delighted, the whole letter, and even the long, narrow envelope in which it was put, filled my heart with tenderness. In the sprawling but diffident handwriting, I recognized Sasha's walk, her way of raising her eyebrow when she laughed, the movement of her lips. But the contents of the letter did not satisfy me. In the first place, poetical letters are not answered in that way. And in the second, why should I go to Sasha's house to wait till it should occur to her stout mamma, her brothers, and her poor relations to leave us alone together? It would never enter their heads. And nothing is more hateful than to have to restrain one's raptures simply because of the intrusion of some animate trumpery in the shape of a half-deaf old woman or little girl pestering one with questions. I sent an answer by the maid, asking Sasha to select some park or boulevard for a rendezvous. My suggestion was readily accepted. I had struck the right chord, as the saying is. Between 4 and 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I made my way to the furthest and most overgrown part of the park. There was not a soul in the park, and the tryst might have taken place somewhere nearer in one of the avenues or arbors, but the women don't like doing it by halves in romantic affairs. In for a penny, in for a pound. If you're in for a tryst, let it be the furthest and most impenetrable thicket, where one runs the risk of stumbling upon some rough or drunken man. When I went up to Sasha, she was standing with her back to me, and in that back I could read a devilish lot of mystery. It seemed as though that back and the nape of her neck and the black spots on her dress were saying, "Hush!" The girl was wearing a simple cotton dress over which she had thrown a light cape. To add to the air of mysterious secrecy, her face was covered with a white veil. Not to spoil the effect, I had to approach on tiptoe and speak in a half-whisper. From what I remember now, I was not so much the essential point of the rendezvous as a detail of it. Sasha was not so much absorbed in the interview herself as in its romantic mysteriousness. My kisses, the silence of the gloomy tree, my vows. There was not a minute in which she forgot herself, was overcome, or let the mysterious expression drop from her face. And really, if there had been any Ivan Sidorich or Sidor Ivanich in my place, she would have felt just as happy. How is one to make out in such circumstances whether one is loved or not, whether the love is the real thing or not? From the park, I took Sasha home with me. The presence of the beloved woman in one's bachelor quarters affects one like wine and music. Usually one begins to speak of the future, and the confidence and self-reliance with which one does is beyond bounds. You make plans and projects, talk fervently of the rank of general, though you have not yet reached the rank of a lieutenant, and altogether you fire off such high-flown nonsense that your listener must have a great deal of love and ignorance of life to assent to it. Fortunately for men, women in love are always blinded by their feelings and never know anything of life. Far from not assenting, they actually turn pale with holy awe, are full of reverence, and hang greedily on the maniac's words. Sasha listened to me with attention, but I soon detected an absent-minded expression on her face. She did not understand me. The future of which I talked interested her only in its external aspect, and I was wasting time in displaying my plans and projects before her. She was keenly interested in knowing which would be her room, what papers she would have in her room, why I had an upright piano instead of a grand piano, and so on. She examined carefully all the little things on my table, looked at the photographs, sniffed at the bottles, peeled the old stamps off the envelopes, saying she wanted them for something. "Please collect old stamps for me," she said, making a grave face. "Please do." Then she found a nut in the window, noisily cracked it, and ate it. "Why don't you stick little labels on the backs of your books?" she asked, taking a look at the bookcase. "What for?" "Oh, so that each book should have its number. And where am I to put my books? I've got books too, you know." What books have you got?" I asked. Sasha raised her eyebrows, thought a moment, and said, "All sorts." And if it had entered my head to ask her what thoughts, what convictions, what aims she had, she would no doubt have raised her eyebrows, thought a minute, and have said it all the same way, "All sorts." Later I saw Sasha home and left her house regularly, officially engaged, and was so reckoned till our wedding. If the reader will allow me to judge merely from my personal experience, I maintain that to be engaged is very dreary, far more than to be a husband or nothing at all. An engaged man is neither one nor the other. He has left one side of the river and not yet reached the other. He is not married, and yet he can't be said to be a bachelor, but is in something not unlike the condition of the porter, whom I have mentioned above. Every day, as soon as I had a free moment, I hastened to my fiancée. As I went, I usually bore with me a multitude of hopes, desires, intentions, suggestions, phrases. I always fancied that as soon as the maid opened the door, I should, from feeling oppressed and stifled, plunge at once up to my neck into a sea of refreshing happiness. But it always turned out otherwise, in fact. Every time I went to see my fiancée, I found all her family and other members of the household busy over the silly trousseau. And by the way, they were hard at work sewing for 2 months, and then they had less than 100 roubles worth of things. There was a smell of irons, candle grease, and fumes. Bugles scrunched under one's feet. The 2 most important rooms were piled up with billows of linen, calico, and muslin, and from among the billows peeped out Sasha's little head, with a thread between her teeth. All the sewing party welcomed me with cries of delight, but at once led me off into the dining room, where I could not hinder them nor see what only husbands are permitted to behold. In spite of my feelings, I had to sit in the dining room and converse with Pimenova, one of the poor relations. Sasha looked worried and excited, kept running by me with a thimble, a skein of wool, or some other boring object. Wait, I shan't be a minute," she would say when I raised imploring eyes to her. "Only fancy, that wretch Stepanida has spoilt the bodice of the barège dress." And after waiting in vain for this grace, I lost my temper, went out the house, and walked about the streets in the company of the new cane I had bought. Or I would want to go for a walk or a drive with my fiancée, would go round and find her already standing in the hall with her mother, dressed to go out and playing with her parasol. "Oh, we are going to the arcade," she would say. "We have got to buy some more cashmere and change the hat." My outing is knocked on the head. I join the ladies and go with them to the arcade. It is revoltingly dull to listen to women shopping, haggling and trying to outdo the sharp shopmen. I felt ashamed when Sasha, after turning over masses of material and knocking down the prices to a minimum, walked out of the shop without buying anything, or else told the shopman to cut her some half-rubles worth. When they came out of the shop, Sasha and her mamma, with scared and worried faces, would discuss at length having made a mistake, having bought the wrong thing, the flowers and the chins being too dark, and so on. Yes, it is a bore to be engaged. I'm glad it's over. Now I am married. It is evening. I am sitting in my study reading. Behind me on the sofa, Sasha is sitting, munching something noisily. I want a glass of beer. Sasha, look for the corkscrew, I say. It's lying about somewhere. Sasha leaps up, rummages in a disorderly way among 2 or 3 heaps of papers, drops the matches, and without finding the corkscrew, sits down in silence. 5 minutes pass. 10. I begin to be fretted both by thirst and vexation. Sasha, do look for the corkscrew, I say. Sasha leaps up again, rummages among the papers near me. Her munching and rustling of the papers affects me like the sound of sharpening knives against each other. I get up and begin looking for the corkscrew myself. At last it is found, and the beer is uncorked. Sasha remains by the table and begins telling me something at great length. You'd better read something, Sasha, I say. She takes up a book, sits down facing me, and begins moving her lips. I look at her little forehead, moving lips, and sink into thought. She is getting on for 20, I reflect. If one takes a boy of the educated class and of that age and compares them, what a difference. The boy would have knowledge and convictions, and some intelligence. But I forgive that difference, just as the low forehead and moving lips are forgiven. I remember in my old Lovelace days, I had cast off woman for a stain on their stockings, and for one foolish word, or for not cleaning their teeth. And now I forgive everything. The munching, the muddling about after the corkscrew, the slovenliness, the long talking about nothing that matters. I forgive it all, almost unconsciously, with no effort of will, as though Sasha's mistakes were my mistakes, and many things which would have made me wince in old days moved me to tenderness and even rapture. The explanation of this forgiveness of everything lies in my love for Sasha. But what is the explanation of the love itself? I really don't know. End of Love by Anton Chekhov. A story without a title by Anton Chekhov. In the 5th century, just as now, the sun rose every morning, and every evening retired to rest. In the morning, when the first rays kissed the dew, the earth revived. The air was filled with the sounds of rapture and hope, while in the evening the same earth subsided into silence and plunged into gloomy darkness. One day was like another, one night like another. From time to time, a storm cloud raced up, and there was the angry rumble of thunder, or a negligent star fell out of the sky, or a pale monk ran to tell the brotherhood that not far from the monastery he had seen a tiger. The monks worked and prayed, and their Father Superior played on the organ, made Latin verses, and wrote music. The wonderful old man possessed an extraordinary gift. He played on the organ with such art that even the oldest monks, whose hearing had grown somewhat dull towards the end of their lives, could not restrain their tears when the sounds of the organ floated from his cell. When he spoke of anything, even the most ordinary things, for instance, of the trees, of the wild beasts, or of the sea, they would not listen to him without a smile or tears. And it seemed that the same chords vibrated in his soul as in the organ. His face flushed, and his voice thundered. And as the monks listened to him, they felt that their souls were spellbound from his inspiration. At such marvelous, splendid moments, his power over them was boundless, and if he had bidden his elders fling themselves into the sea, they would all, every one of them, have hastened to carry out his wishes. His music, his voice, his poetry, in which he glorified God, the heavens and the earth, were a continual source of joy to the monks. It sometimes happened that through the monotony of their lives, they grew weary of the trees, the flowers, the spring, the autumn. Their ears were tired of the sound of the sea, and the song of the birds seemed tedious to them. But the talents of their Father Superior were as necessary to them as their daily bread. Dozens of years passed by, and every day was like every other day. Every night was like every other night. Except the birds and the wild beasts, not one soul appeared near the monastery. The nearest human habitation was far away, and to reach it from the monastery, or to reach the monastery from it, meant a journey of over 70 miles across the desert. Only men who despised life, who had renounced it, and who came to the monastery as to the grave, ventured to cross the desert. What was the amazement of the monks, therefore, when one night there knocked at their gate a man who turned out to be from the town, and the most ordinary sinner who loved life. Before saying his prayers and asking for the Father Superior's blessing, this man asked for wine and food. To the question how he had come from the town into the desert, he answered by a long story of hunting. He had gone out hunting and had drunk too much and lost his way. To the suggestion that he should enter the monastery and save his soul, he replied with a smile, "I am not a fit companion for you." When he had eaten and drunk, he looked at the monks who had served him, shook his head reproachfully, and said, "You don't do anything, you monks. You are good for nothing but eating and drinking. Is that the way to save one's soul? Only think, while you sit here in peace, eat and drink, and dream of beatitude, your neighbors are perishing and going to hell. You should see what is going on in the town. Some are dying of hunger. Others, not knowing what to do with their gold, sink into profligacy and perish like flies struck in honey. There is no faith, no truth in men. Whose task is it to save them? Whose work is to preach to them? It is not for me, drunk from morning till night as I am. Can a meek spirit, a loving heart, and faith in God have been given you for you to sit here within four walls doing nothing?" The townsman's drunken words were insolent and unseemly, but they had a strange effect upon the Father Superior. The old man exchanged glances with the monks, turned pale, and said, "My brothers, he speaks the truth, you know. Indeed, poor people in their weakness and lack of understanding are perishing in vice and infidelity, while we do not move, as though it did not concern us. Why should I not go and remind them of the Christ whom they have forgotten?" The townsman's words had carried the old man away. The next day he took his staff, said farewell to the brotherhood, and set off for the town. And the monks were left without music, without his speeches and verses. They spent a month drearily, then a second, but the old man did not come back. At last, after 3 months had passed, the familiar tap of his staff was heard. The monks flew to meet him and showered questions upon him. But instead of being delighted to see them, he wept bitterly and did not utter a word. The monks noticed that he looked greatly aged and had grown thinner. His face looked exhausted and wore an expression of profound sadness, and when he wept, he had the air of a man who had been outraged. The monks fell into weeping too, and began with sympathy asking him why he was weeping, why his face was so gloomy. But he locked himself in his cell without uttering a word. For 7 days he sat in his cell, eating and drinking nothing, weeping and not playing on his organ. To knocking at his door and the entreaties of the monks to come out and share his grief with them, he replied with unbroken silence. At last he came out, gathering all the monks around him, with a tear-stained face and with an expression of grief and indignation. He began telling them of what had befallen him during those 3 months. His voice was calm, and his eyes were smiling when he described his journey from the monastery to the town. On the road, he told them, the birds sang to him, the brooks gurgled, and sweet youthful hopes agitated his soul. He marched on and felt like a soldier going to battle, and confident of victory. He walked on dreaming and composed poems and hymns, and reached the end of his journey without noticing it. But his voice quivered, his eyes flashed, and he was full of wrath when he came to speak of the town and of the men in it. Never in his life had he seen or even dared to imagine what he met with when he went into the town. Only then, for the first time in his life, in his old age, he saw and understood how powerful was the devil, how fair was the evil, and how weak and faint-hearted and worthless were men. By an unhappy chance, the first dwelling he entered was the abode of vice. Some 50 men in possession of much money were eating and drinking wine beyond measure. Intoxicated by the wine, they sang songs and boldly uttered terrible, revolting words such as a God-fearing man could not bring himself to pronounce. Boundlessly free, self-confident and happy, they feared neither God nor the devil, nor death, but said and did what they liked, and went whither their lust led them. And the wine, clear as amber, flecked with sparks of gold, must have been irresistibly sweet and fragrant, for each man who drank it smiled blissfully and wanted to drink more. To the smile of man, it responded with a smile and sparkled joyfully when they drank it, as though it knew the devilish charm it kept hidden in its sweetness. The old man, growing more and more incensed and weeping with wrath, went on to describe what he had seen. On a table in the midst of the revelers, he said, stood a sinful, half-naked woman. It was hard to imagine, or to find in nature anything more lovely and fascinating. This reptile, young, long-haired, dark-skinned, with black eyes and full lips, shameless and insolent, showed her snow-white teeth and smiled as though to say, "Look how shameless, how beautiful I am." Silken brocade fell in lovely folds from her shoulders, but her beauty would not hide itself under her clothes, but eagerly thrust itself through the folds, like the young grass through the ground in spring. The shameless woman drank wine, sang songs, and abandoned herself to anyone who wanted her. Then the old man, wrathfully brandishing his arms, described the horse races, the bullfights, the theaters, the artist studios where they painted naked women or modeled them of clay. He spoke with inspiration, with sonorous beauty, as though he were playing on unseen chords, while the monks, petrified, greedily drank in his words and gasped with rapture. After describing all the charms of the devil, the beauty of evil, and the fascinating grace of the dreadful female form, the old man cursed the devil, turned and shut himself up in his cell. When he came out of his cell in the morning, there was not a monk left in the monastery. They had all fled to the town. A Horsey Name by Anton Chekhov. Major General Buldeeff was suffering from a toothache. He had rinsed his mouth with vodka and cognac, applied tobacco ashes, opium, turpentine, and kerosene to the aching tooth, rubbed his cheek with iodine, and put cotton wool soaked with alcohol into his ears. But all these remedies had either failed to relieve him or else made him sick. The dentist was sent for. He picked at his tooth and prescribed quinine, but this did not help the general. Buldeev met the suggestion that the tooth should be pulled with refusal. Everyone in the house, his wife, his children, his servants, even Petka, the scullery boy, suggested some remedy. Among others, his steward, Ivan Evchich, came to him and advised him to try a conjurer. "Your Excellency," he said, 10 years ago, an exercise man lived in this country whose name was Jacob. He was a first-class conjurer for the toothache. He used simply to turn towards the window and spit, and the pain would go in a minute. That was a gift. Where is he now? He was dismissed from the revenue service. He went to live in Saratov with his mother-in-law. He makes his living off nothing but teeth now. If anyone has a toothache, he sends for him to cure it. The Saratov people have him come to their houses, but he cures people in other cities by telegraph. Send him a telegraph, Your Excellency. Say, I, God's servant Alexei, have the toothache. I want you to cure me. You can send him his fees by mail. Stuff and nonsense. Humbug. Try it, Your Excellency. He is fond of vodka, it is true, and is living with some German woman instead of his wife. And he uses terrible language, but he is a remarkable wonder-worker. Do send him a telegraph, Alexei, begged the general's wife. You don't believe in conjuring, I know, but I have tried it. Why not send him a message? Even if you don't believe, it will do you any good. It can't kill you. Very well, then, Buldeev consented. I would willingly send a telegram to the devil, let alone to the excisemen. Ouch! I can't stand this. Come, where does your conjurer live? What is his name? The general sat down at his desk and took up a pen. He is known to every dog in Saratov, said the steward. Just address the telegram to Mr. Jacob. Jacob? Well? Jacob what? I can't remember his surname. Jacob, darn it, what is his surname? I thought of it as I was coming along. Wait a minute. Ivan raised his eyes to the ceiling and moved his lips. Buldeev and his wife waited impatiently for him to remember the name. Well, what is it? Think harder. Just a minute. Jacob. I can't remember it. It's a common name, too, something to do with a horse. Is it mares? No, it isn't mares. Wait a bit. Is it colt? No, it isn't colt. I know perfectly well it's a horsey name, but it's absolutely gone out of my head. Is it filly? No, wait a minute. Maresfield, Maresden, Farrier, Harrier. That's a doggy name, not a horsey one. Is it Foley? No. It isn't Foley. It's just a second. Horseman, horsey, hackney. No, it isn't any of those. Then how am I to send that telegram? Think a little harder. One moment. Carter, Coltsfoot, Shafter. Shaftesbury? Suggested the general's wife. No. Wheeler. No, that isn't it. I've forgotten it. Then why on earth did you come pestering me with your advice if you couldn't remember the man's name? Stormed the general. Get out of here. Ivan went slowly out, and the general clucked his cheek and went rushing through the house. Ouch! Oh, Lord! He howled. Oh, Mother! Ouch! I'm as blind as a bat. The steward went into the garden, and, raising his eyes to heaven, tried to remember the exciseman's name. Hunter, Huntley. No, that's wrong. Cobden, Dobbins, Maresley. Shortly afterward, the steward was again summoning his master. Well, have you thought of it? Asked the general. No, not yet, Your Excellency. Is it Barnes? Asked the general. Is it Palfrey by any chance? Everyone in the house began madly to invent names. Horses of every possible age, breed, and sex were considered. Their names, hooves, and harnesses were all thought of. People were frantically walking up and down in the house, garden, servants' quarters, and kitchen, all scratching their heads and searching for the right name. Suddenly the steward was sent for again. "Is it herder?" they asked him. "Hawker? Hide? Groom?" "No, no, no," answered Ivan, and casting up his eyes, he went on thinking aloud. "Steed, charger, horsely, harness." "Papa!" cried a voice from the nursery. "Tracy! Bitter!" The whole farm was now in an uproar. The impatient, agonized general promised 5 rubles to anyone who could think of the right name, and a perfect mob began to follow Ivan Evsich about. "Bailey!" they cried to him. "Trotter! Hackett!" Evening came at last, and still the name had not been found. The household went to bed without sending a telegram. The general did not sleep a wink, but walked, groaning, up and down his room. At 3 o'clock in the morning he went out into the yard and tapped at the steward's window. "It isn't Gelder, is it?" he asked, almost in tears. "No, not Gelder, Your Excellency," answered Ivan, sighing apologetically. "Perhaps it isn't a horsey name at all. Perhaps it is something entirely different." "No, no, upon my word. It's a horsey name, Your Excellency. I remember that perfectly." "What an abominable memory you have, brother. The name is worth more than anything on earth to me now. I'm in agony." Next morning the general sent for the dentist again. "I'll have it out," he cried. "I can't stand this any longer." The dentist came and pulled out the aching tooth. The pain at once subsided, and the general grew quieter. Having done his work and received his fee, the dentist climbed into his gig and drove away. At the field outside the front gate he met Ivan. The steward was standing by the roadside, plunged in thought, with his eyes fixed on the ground at his feet. Judging from the deep wrinkles that furrowed his brow, he was painfully racking his brains over something, and was muttering to himself. "Done. Saddler. Buckle. Coachman." "Hello, Ivan," cried the doctor, driving up. "Won't you sell me a load of hay? I've been buying mine from the peasants lately, but it's no good." Ivan glared dully at the doctor, smiled vaguely, and without answering a word, threw up his arms and rushed towards the house as if a mad dog were after him. "I've thought of the name, Your Excellency!" he shrieked in delighted, bursting into the general's study. "I've thought of it, thanks to the doctor. Hayes! Hayes is the excise man's name. Hayes, Your Honor. Send a telegram to Hayes." "Slow coach," said the general contemptuously, snapping his fingers at him. "I don't need your horsey name now, slow coach." End of A Horsey Name by Anton Chekhov. Vanka by Anton Chekhov. 9-year-old Vanka Zhukov, who had been apprentice to the shoemaker Alyakin for 3 months, did not go to bed the night before Christmas. He waited until the master and mistress and the assistants had gone out to an early church service, to procure from his employer's cupboard a small vial of ink and a penholder with a rusty nib. Then, spreading a crumpled sheet of paper in front of him, he began to write. Before, however, deciding to make the first letter, he looked furtively at the door and at the window, glanced several times at the somber icon, on either side of which stretched shelves full of lasts, and heaved a heart-rending sigh. The sheet of paper was spread on a bench, and he himself was on his knees in front of it. "Dear Grandfather Konstantin Makarich," he wrote, I am writing you a letter. I hope you a happy Christmas and all God's holy best. I have no mama or papa. You are all I have. Vanka took a look towards the window in which shone the reflection of his candle, and vividly pictured to himself his grandfather, Konstantin Makarich, who was night watchman at Monsieur's Zivarev. He was a small, lean, usually lively and active old man of 65, always smiling and blear-eyed. All day he slept in the servants' kitchen or trifled with the cooks. At night, enveloped in his ample sheepskin coat, he strayed round the domain, tapping with his cudgel. Behind him, each hanging its head, walked the old bitch Konstanka and the dog Vyun, so named because of his black coat and long body, and his resemblance to a loach. Vyun was an unusually civil and friendly dog, to be trusted, looking as kindly at a stranger as at his master. But he was not to be trusted. Beneath his deference and humbleness was hid the most inquisitorial maliciousness. No one knew better than he how to sneak up and take a bite at a leg, or slip into the larder, or steal a Muzok's chicken. More than once they had nearly broken his hind legs. Twice he had been hung up. Every week he was nearly flogged to death, but he always recovered. At this moment, for certain, Vanka's grandfather must be standing at the gate, blinking his eyes at the bright red windows of the village church, stamping his feet in their high felt boots, and jesting with the people in the yard. His cudgel will be hanging from his belt. He will be hugging himself with cold, giving a little dry old man's cough, and at times pinching a servant girl or a cook. "Won't we take some snuff?" he asks, holding out his snuff box to the women. The women take a pinch of snuff and sneeze. The old man goes into indescribable ecstasies, breaks into loud laughter, and cries, "Off with it! It will freeze to your nose." He gives his snuff to the dogs, too. Kashtanka sneezes, twishes her nose, and walks away offended. Vyun deferentially refuses to sniff and wags his tail. It is inglorious weather, not a breath of wind, clear and frosty. It is a dark night, but the whole village, with its white roofs and streaks of smoke from the chimneys, the trees silvered with hoarfrost, and the snowdrifts, you can see it all. The sky scintillates with bright twinkling stars, and the Milky Way stands out so clearly, and it looks as if it had been polished and rubbed over with snow for the holidays. Vanka sighs, dips his pen in the ink, and continues to write. "Last night I got a thrashing. My master dragged me by my hair into the yard, and belabored me with a shoemaker's stirrup, because, while I was rocking his brat in the cradle, I unfortunately fell asleep. And during the week my mistress told me to clean a herring, and begin by its tail. So she took the herring and struck its snout into my face. The assistants tease me, send me to the tavern for vodka, make me steal the master's cucumbers, and the master beats me with whatever is handy. Food there is none. In the morning is bread, at dinner gruel, and in the evening bread again. As for tea or sour cabbage soup, the master and the mistress themselves guzzle that. They make me sleep in the vestibule, and when their brat cries, I don't sleep at all, but have to rock the cradle. Dear grandpapa, for heaven's sake, take me away from here, home to our village. I can't bear this any more. I bow to the ground to you, and will pray to God for ever and ever. Take me from here, or I shall die." The corners of Vanka's mouth went down. He rubbed his eyes with his dirty fist and sobbed. "I'll grate your tobacco for you," he continued. "I'll pray to God for you, and if there is anything wrong, then flog me like the grey goat. And if you really think I shan't find work, then I'll ask the manager. For Christ's sake, Let me clean the boots, or I'll go instead of Fedya as under herdsman. Dear grandpapa, I can't bear this any more. It'll kill me. I wanted to run away to our village, but I have no boots, and I was afraid of the frost. And when I grow up, I'll look after you, and no one shall harm you. And when you die, I'll pray for the repose of your soul, just like I do for Mama Pelageya. As for Moscow, it is a large town. There are all gentlemen's houses, lots of them. Lots of horses, no sheep, and dogs are not vicious. The children don't come round at Christmas with a star. No one is allowed to sing in the choir, and once I saw in a shop window hooks on a line with fishing rods, all for sale, and for every kind of fish. Awfully convenient. And there was one hook which would catch a sheatfish weighing a pound. And there are shops with guns, like the master's, and I am sure they must cost 100 rubles each. And in the meat shops there are woodcocks, partridges, and hares. But who shot them or where they come from, the shopman won't say. Dear grandpapa, and when the masters give a Christmas tree, take a golden walnut and hide it in my green box. Ask the young lady, Olga Ignatyevna, for it. Say it's for Vanka. Vanka sighed convulsively, and again stared at the window. He remembered that his grandfather always went to the forest for the Christmas tree, and took his grandson with him. What happy times! The frost crackled, his grandfather crackled, and as they both did, Vanka did the same. Then, before cutting down the Christmas tree, his grandfather smoked his pipe, took a long pinch of snuff, and made fun of poor frozen little Vanka. The young fir trees, wrapped in hoarfrost, stood motionless, waiting for which of them would die. Suddenly a hare springing from somewhere would dart over the snowdrift. His grandfather could not help shouting, "Catch it! Catch it! Catch it! Ah, short-tailed devil!" When the tree was down, his grandfather dragged it to the master's house, and there they set about decorating it. The young lady, Olga Ignatyevna, Vanka's great friend, busied herself most about it. When little Vanka's mother, Pelageya, was still alive, and was servant woman in the house, Olga Ignatyevna used to stuff him with sugar candy, and having nothing to do, taught him to read, write, count up to 100, and even to dance the quadrille. When Pelageya died, they placed the orphan Vanka in the kitchen with his grandfather, and from the kitchen he was sent to Moscow, to Alyakin, the shoemaker. "Come quick, dear grandpapa," continued Vanka. "I beseech you, for Christ's sake, take me from here. Have pity on a poor orphan, for here they beat me, and I am frightfully hungry, and so sad that I can't tell you. I cry all the time. The other day the master hit me on the head with a last. I fell to the ground, and only just returned to life. My life is a misfortune, worse than any dog's. I send greetings to Aliona, to One-Eyed Tagore, and the coachman, and don't let anyone have my mouth organ. I remain your grandson, Ivan Zhukov. Dear grandpapa, do come." Vanka folded his sheet of paper in 4, and put it into an envelope purchased the night before for a kopeck. He thought a little, dipped the pen into the ink, and wrote the address, "The village, to my grandfather." He then scratched his head, thought again, and added, "Konstantin Makarich." Pleased with not having been interfered with in his writing, he put on his cap, and, without putting on his sheepskin coat, ran out in his shirt-sleeves into the street. The shopman at the poulsterer's, from whom he had inquired the night before, had told him that letters were to be put into post-boxes, and from there they were conveyed over the whole earth, in mail troikas by drunken postboys, and to the sound of bells. Vanka ran to the first post-box, and slipped his precious letter into the slit. An hour afterwards, lulled by hope, He was sleeping soundly. In his dreams, he saw a stove. By the stove, his grandfather, sitting with his legs dangling down, barefooted, and reading a letter to the cooks, and Viun, walking round the stove, wagged his tail. The Bet by Anton Chekhov. 1. It was a dark autumn night. The old banker was pacing from corner to corner of his study, recalling to his mind the party he gave in the autumn 15 years before. There were many clever people at the party, and much interesting conversation. They talked, among other things, of capital punishment. The guests, among them not a few scholars and journalists, for the most part disapproved of capital punishment. They found it obsolete as a means of punishment, unfitted to a Christian state, and immoral. Some of them thought the capital punishment should be replaced universally by life imprisonment. "I don't agree with you," said the host. "I myself have experienced neither capital punishment nor life imprisonment. But if one may judge a priori, then in my opinion, capital punishment is more moral and more humane than imprisonment. Execution kills instantly. Life imprisonment kills by degrees. Who is the more humane executioner? One who kills you in a few seconds, or one who draws the life out of you incessantly for years?" "They're both equally important," remarked one of the guests, "because their purpose is the same, to take away life. The state is not God. It has no right to take away that which it cannot give back, if it should so desire." Among the company was a lawyer, a young man of about 25. On being asked his opinion, he said, "Capital punishment and life imprisonment are equally immoral. But if I were offered the choice between them, I would certainly choose the second. It's better to live somehow than not to live at all." There ensued a lively discussion. The banker, who was then younger and more nervous, suddenly lost his temper, banging his fist on the table and turning to the young lawyer, cried out, "That's a lie! I bet you 2 million you wouldn't stick in a cell, even for 5 years." "If you mean it seriously," replied the lawyer, "then I bet I'll stay not 5, but 15. 15? Done!" cried the banker. "Gentlemen, I stake 2 millions. "Agreed. You stake 2 millions, I my freedom," said the lawyer. So this wild, ridiculous bet came to pass. The banker, who at that time had too many millions to count, spoiled and capricious, was beside himself with rapture. During supper he said to the lawyer jokingly, "Come to your senses, young man, before it's too late. 2 millions is nothing to me. But you stand to lose 3 or 4 of the best years of your life. I say 3 or 4 because you'll never stick it out any longer. Don't forget either, you unhappy man, that voluntary is much heavier than enforced imprisonment. The idea that you have the right to free yourself at any moment will poison the whole of your life in the cell. I pity you." And now the banker, pacing from corner to corner, recalled all this and asked himself, "Why did I make this bet? What's the good? The lawyer loses 15 years of his life, and I throw away 2 millions. Will it convince people that capital punishment is worse or better than imprisonment for life? No, no. All stuff and rubbish. On my part, it was the caprice of a well-fed man. On the lawyer's, pure greed of gold." He recollected further what happened after the evening party. It was decided that the lawyer must undergo his imprisonment under the strictest observation, in a garden wing of the banker's house. It was agreed that during the period he would be deprived of the right to cross the threshold, to see living people, to hear human voices, and to receive letters and newspapers. He was permitted to have a musical instrument, to read books, to write letters, to drink wine and smoke tobacco. By agreement, he could communicate, but only in silence, with the outside world, through a little window specially constructed for this purpose. Everything necessary, books, music, wine, he could receive in any quantity by sending a note through the window. The agreement provided for all the minutest details, which made the confinement strictly solitary, and it obliged the lawyer to remain exactly 15 years, from 12 o'clock of November 14th, 1870, to 12 o'clock of November 14th, 1885. The least attempt on his part to violate the conditions, to escape if only for 2 minutes before the time, freed the banker from the obligation to pay him the 2 millions. During the first year of imprisonment, the lawyer, as far as it was possible to judge from his short notes, suffered terrible loneliness and boredom. From his wing, day and night came the sound of the piano. He rejected wine and tobacco. Wine, he wrote, excites desires, and desires are the chief foes of a prisoner. Besides, nothing is more boring than to drink good wine alone, and tobacco spoils the air in his room. During the first year, the lawyer was sent books of a light character, novels with a complicated love interest, stories of crime and fantasy, comedies, and so on. In the second year, the piano was heard no longer, and the lawyer asked only for the classics. In the fifth year, music was heard again, and the prisoner asked for wine. Those that watched him said that during the whole of that year he was only eating, drinking, and lying on his bed. He yawned often and talked angrily to himself. Books he did not read. Sometimes at nights he would sit down to write. He would write for a long time and tear it all up in the morning. More than once he was heard to weep. In the second half of the sixth year, the prisoner began zealously to study languages, philosophy, and history. He fell on these subjects so hungrily that the banker hardly had time to get books enough for him. In the space of 4 years, about 600 volumes were bought at his request. It was while that passion lasted that the banker received the following letter from the prisoner. My dear jailer, I am writing these letters in 6 languages. Show them to experts. Let them read them. If they do not find one single mistake, I beg you to give orders to have a gun fired off in the garden. By the noise I shall know that my efforts have not been in vain. The geniuses of all ages and countries speak in different languages, but in them all burns the same flame. Oh, if you knew my heavenly happiness, now that I can understand them. The prisoner's desire was fulfilled. 2 shots were fired in the garden by the banker's orders. Later on, after the 10th year, the lawyer sat immobile before his table and read only the New Testament. The banker found it strange that a man who, in 4 years, had mastered 600 erudite volumes should have spent nearly a year in reading one book, easy to understand and by no means thick. The New Testament was then replaced by the history of religions and theology. During the last 2 years of his confinement, the prisoner read an extraordinary amount, quite haphazardly. Now he would apply himself to the natural sciences, then he would read Byron or Shakespeare. Notes used to come from him, which he asked to be sent at the same time a book on chemistry, a textbook of medicine, a novel, and some treatise on philosophy or theology. He read as though he was swimming in a sea among broken pieces of wreckage, and in his desire to save his life, was eagerly grasping at one piece or another. 2. The banker recalled all this, and thought, tomorrow at 12 o'clock he receives his freedom. Under the agreement, I shall have to pay him 2 millions. If I pay, it's all over for me. I am ruined forever. 15 years before, he had too many millions to count, and now he was afraid to ask himself which he had more of, money or debts. Gambling on the stock exchange, risky speculation, and the recklessness of which he could not rid himself even in old age, had gradually brought his business to decay. and the fearless, self-confident, proud man of business had become an ordinary banker, trembling at every rise and fall in the market. "That cursed bet," murmured the old man, clutching his head in despair. "Why didn't the man die? He's only 40 years old. He will take away my last farthing, marry, enjoy life, gamble on the exchange, and I will look on like an envious beggar and hear the same words from him every day. I'm obliged to you for the happiness of my life. Let me help you." "No, it's too much. The only escape from bankruptcy and disgrace is that the man should die." The clock had just struck 3. The banker was listening. In the house, everyone was asleep, and one could hear only the frozen trees whining outside the windows. Trying to make no sound, he took out of his safe the key of the door which had not been opened for 15 years, put on his overcoat, and went out of the house. The garden was dark and cold. It was raining. A damp, penetrating wind howled in the garden and gave the trees no rest. Though he strained his eyes, the banker could see neither the ground, nor the white statues, nor the garden wing, nor the trees. Approaching the garden wing, he called the watchman twice. There was no answer. Evidently, the watchman had taken shelter from the bad weather and was now asleep somewhere in the kitchen or the greenhouse. "If I have the courage to fulfill my intention," thought the old man, "the suspicion will fall on the watchman first of all." In the darkness he groped for the steps and the door, and entered the hall of the garden wing, then poked his way into a narrow passage and struck a match. Not a soul was there. Someone's bed, with no bedclothes on it, stood there, and an iron stove loomed dark in the corner. The seals on the door that led into the prisoner's room were unbroken. When the match went out, the old man, trembling from agitation, peeped into the little window. In the prisoner's room, a candle was burning dimly. The prisoner himself sat by the table. Only his back, the hair on his head, and his hands were visible. Open books were strewn about the table, the 2 chairs, and on the carpet near the table. 5 minutes passed, and the prisoner never once stirred. 15 years' confinement had taught him to sit motionless. The banker tapped on the window with his finger, but the prisoner made no movement in reply. Then the banker cautiously tore the seals from the door and put the key into the lock. The rusty lock gave a hoarse groan, and the door creaked. The banker expected instantly to hear a cry of surprise and the sound of steps. 3 minutes passed, and it was as quiet inside as it had been before. He made up his mind to enter. Before the table sat a man, unlike an ordinary human being. It was a skeleton, with tight-drawn skin, with long curly hair like a woman's, and a shaggy beard. The color of his face was yellow, of an earthy shade. The cheeks were sunken, the back long and narrow, and the hand upon which he leaned his hairy head was so lean and skinny that it was painful to look at. His hair was already silvering with gray, and no one who glanced at the senile emaciation of the face would have believed he was only 40 years old. On the table before his bended head lay a sheet of paper on which something was written in a tiny hand. "Poor devil," thought the banker. "He's asleep and probably seeing millions in his dreams. I have only to take and throw this half-dead thing on the bed, smother him in a moment with a pillow, and the most careful examination will find no trace of unnatural death. But first, let us read what he has written here." The banker took the sheet from the table and read, "Tomorrow at 12 o'clock midnight I shall obtain my freedom and the right to mix with people. But before I leave this room and see the sun, I think it necessary to say a few words to you. On my own clear conscience, and before God, who sees me, I declare to you
that I despise freedom, life, health, and all that your books call the blessings of the world. For 15 years I have diligently studied earthly life. True, I saw neither the earth nor the people, but in your books I drank fragrant of wine, sang songs, hunted deer and wild boar in the forests, loved women, and beautiful women, like clouds ethereal, created by the magic of your poet's genius, visited me by night and whispered to me wonderful tales, which made my head drunken. In your books I climbed the summits of Elbrus and Mont Blanc, and saw from there how the sun rose in the morning, and in the evening suffused the sky, the ocean and the mountain ridges with a purple gold. I saw from there how above me lightnings glimmered cleaving the clouds. I saw green forests, fields, rivers, lakes, cities. I heard sirens calling, and the playing of the pipes of Pan. I touched the wings of beautiful devils, who came flying to me to speak of God. In your books I cast myself into bottomless abysses, worked miracles, burned cities to the ground, preached new religions, conjured whole countries. Your books gave me wisdom. All that unwearying human thought created in the centuries is compressed into a little lump in my skull. I know that I am cleverer than you all. And I despise your books, despise all the worldly blessings and wisdom. Everything is void, frail, visionary, and delusive as a mirage. Though you be proud and wise and beautiful, yet will death wipe you from the face of the earth, like the mice underground. And your posterity, your history, and the immortality of your young men of genius will be as frozen slag, burnt down together with the terrestrial globe. You are mad and gone the wrong way. You take falsehood for truth and ugliness for beauty. You would marvel if suddenly apple and orange trees should bear frogs and lizards instead of fruit, and if roses should begin to breathe the odor of a sweating horse. So do I marvel you, who have bartered heaven for earth. I do not want to understand you. That I may show you indeed my contempt for that by which you live, I waive the 2 millions, of which I once dreamed as of paradise, and which I now despise. That I may deprive myself of my right to them, I shall come out from here 5 minutes before the stipulated term, and thus shall violate the agreement. When it got read, the banker put the sheet on the table, kissed the head of the strange man, and began to weep. He went out of the wing. Never at any other time, not even after his terrible losses in the exchange, had he felt such contempt for himself as now. Coming home, he lay down on his bed, but agitation and tears kept him a long time from sleeping. The next morning the poor watchman came running to him and told him that they had seen the man who lived in the wing climb through the window into the garden. He had gone to the gate and disappeared. The banker instantly went with his servants to the wing and established the escape of his prisoner. To avoid unnecessary rumors, he took the paper with the renunciation from the table and, on his return, locked it in his safe.